Hey everybody. So, free agency is certainly not over. We're only one day into it, but most of the big names and important players have signed. There's really not much left on the market as far as guys that are going to step into an NHL spot and make a big impact. There's really only a couple of those left. So, I don't think it's too early to do winners and losers of free agency. Um, so that's what I'm going to do right now based on everything that's happened yesterday and so far today, even though today's really not much has happened except for James Neal. Before we get to that, if you are not yet a subscriber of this channel, please hit that subscribe button. If you're a fan of the NHL or hockey at all, there is something here for you. Whether you just follow a certain team or you follow the league as a whole, there are videos here that you will enjoy. So please hit that subscribe button if you're not yet a subscriber. So now, let's talk about 5 winners and 5 losers of free agency this year. I'll say this: there are more than just 5 winners. These I just think are the top 5, but other teams did a good job as well. And as far as the losers go, nobody is a huge loser because there weren't really any ridiculous contracts this year. There were nobody gave a Milan Lucic type $6 million a year, David Backus $6 million a year. Like there were none of those ridiculous contracts really this year. So the losers, mostly it's about them not making up for players that they lost or not doing much of anything. There's no clear loser in that they completely overpaid for somebody and signed them to a stupid deal. So, let's get going here. The winners. My winners are Calgary, Toronto, Colorado, Minnesota, and Philadelphia. My losers are Winnipeg, New York Islanders, Montreal, Carolina, and Boston. And I will go into detail on each of these. Calgary. Calgary made some really nice moves. They brought in Derek Ryan to be a third-line center. I think that's a fantastic move. It makes them better. Austin Czarnik came in to be a bottom 6 forward and maybe even an extra forward. That's just a solid depth move for them. But the big win came this morning when they signed James Neal to a 5-year contract. Adding James Neal to the Flames makes them much better, especially offensively. And they're not a bad offensive team to begin with. But Neal is a 20 plus goal scorer every year, can get close to 30 if he plays well. And you bring him into Calgary, a team that was supposed to be good last year but missed the playoffs, and he makes them a lot better. So Calgary, a huge win for them, getting Neal, Ryan, and Czarnik. Toronto, obviously there's not much to say about Toronto. They landed John Tavares. They got the biggest fish in the sea, and that's a win in itself. Did they overpay for him a little bit? Maybe. I don't know if Tavares is truly worth $11 million a year, but we'll have to wait and see how he plays as a Maple Leaf. But nonetheless, they got the big fish. They reeled him in. And they are a much better team up front now with John Tavares as their number 1 center and Austin Matthews as their number 2. Colorado, a team that surprisingly made the playoffs last year, had a really good year. Have shown great strides in moving forward from where they were 2 years ago. They made a couple of really nice moves. They added Ian Cole on the back end, who I think defensive depth is so important in the NHL. And he's someone who can play in a bottom pair role and really solidify the defense and play great in his own end and help out the back end a lot in Colorado. And they added Matt Calvert, a bottom 6 forward who brings a ton of energy, has a little bit of offensive ability. He can score some goals. He's not going to score 25 or anything, but he can put the puck in the net as a secondary scorer, and he can kill penalties. He skates really well. Matt Calvert is going to be a meaningful addition to the Colorado's bottom 6. I think they did a really good job there. Minnesota didn't make any big moves, but they added some really good depth to their team. Obviously, they were a playoff team last year. They have some good players in place. They just needed to solidify, I think, the bottom six and also a little bit on the back end. They re-signed Nick Seeler. He's going to be a bottom pair defenseman there. They brought in Greg Patterin, who I think is going to really help on the back end. He's a physical defensive defenseman. He's going to, in the role as a fifth or sixth guy, I think he's going to do really well in Minnesota. And up front, they added a whole bunch of veteran bottom six forwards up front. J.T. Brown, Matt Hendricks, Eric Fair. Those are all guys who are going to go into camp competing for a job to play on the fourth line and be a meaningful player on the fourth line. And they're all good veteran guys who I think can really help the Wild. So I think Minnesota did a really good job of building a supporting cast and building some veteran depth players in their organization this free agency. And my last winner, Philadelphia, they only made one move, but it was a pretty big one. They brought back James Van Riemsdyk, and he changes a lot in Philadelphia. Philly was a really good team last year. The emergence of Sean Couturier has been huge. Claude Giroux had 100-plus points. Jake Voracek's still good. Wayne Simmons has declined a little bit, but he's still a solid player. But James Van Riemsdyk is a perennial 30-goal scorer, and adding him to the mix in Philadelphia makes them so much better. He's just another offensive weapon in Philly, and they have a young defense, but really talented. If they can get their goaltending figured out and get a goaltending performance from their goaltenders that they should be getting from Brian Elliott and Michael Neuwirth or whoever else they put in net this year, they're a real threat because they are a well-built team, and JVR just really adds a lot of offense to that team. So I'm a huge fan of Philly bringing him back. Now, on to the other side, the losers. The Winnipeg Jets. Winnipeg didn't really add anybody except maybe a third-string goalie in Laurent Brossoit. They made a trade getting rid of Joel Armia and some other assets, and Steve Mason, obviously, to open up cap space, to bring back Paul Stastny. Paul Stastny was their guy. They wanted him back as second-line center, and he went to Vegas. So now Winnipeg doesn't have a second-line center because it will be Brian Little if they don't make any more moves, but Little at this point really to me is a third-liner. So they're out a second-line center, and they didn't really add anybody meaningful. So free agency was not good to the Winnipeg Jets. The New York Islanders, well, they had probably the worst free agent day of all. They lost John Tavares. He's off to Toronto, and they didn't replace him with anything. No Stastny, no Bozak. They didn't bring in anyone that is even close to filling in for John Tavares. Not that anyone on the market was at John Tavares' level, but they could have at least brought in Stastny to help heal the wound a little bit. But they didn't do that. They re-signed Thomas Hickey for 4 years, who's just a defenseman that he's a bottom pair defenseman on the back end. And they brought in Leo Komarov and Valtteri Filppula, a couple of bottom six forwards. None of those moves even come close to making up for the loss of Tavares. The Islanders were huge losers in free agency this year. Montreal, they did nothing to make their team better. They brought in a few depth guys on two-way contracts. Michael Chaput and Xavier Ouellet. They did nothing to make the team better. So Montreal pretty much remains stagnant, and they're going to stink this year just like they stunk last year. They're just not in a good place as a franchise right now. Carolina lost Derek Ryan, and they lost Joakim Nordstrom. Not that he's much of a loss. I'll talk about that in a second. but they didn't bring anyone in. What is the plan here in Carolina to make this team better? The only guy that they signed is a backup goalie because they lost Cam Ward to Chicago. So they brought in Peter Mrazek to be Scott Darling's backup. Sure, okay, solid backup goalie, but Carolina didn't do anything to make their team better. They didn't add any meaningful forwards or defensemen that are going to boost them from where they were last year. And I don't see what the plan is in Carolina. I don't think they've done anything so far to make them a playoff team. So I think they're going to be sitting right around 500 where they were last season unless another major move is made. And lastly, the Boston Bruins. I have a lot of mixed feelings about what the Bruins did. I like them bringing in John Moore. John Moore is another left shot defenseman that can play on the middle pair or the bottom pair. And he is good for the team. He makes them better, and they got him at a pretty cheap price too, $2.75 million per year. I don't like the term. I think 5 years is too long. It should have been 3, but the money's not bad, so I like the move overall. However, with them bringing in more, trade talks of Torrey Krug have picked up, or at least trade rumors about Torrey Krug have picked up. The Moore signing is not good if they trade Torrey Krug, because Torrey Krug is a 50-point defenseman every year. John Moore is a 30-point defenseman in a good year. So Krug is much better than Moore. If they trade Krug and then move Moore up to replace him, that doesn't make the team better. It makes them worse. They need Krug and Moore in the lineup for this for this signing to be beneficial for them, and that knocks Matt Grzelcyk down to being the 7th defenseman. He's another offensive guy, but he's good. I like Grzelcyk, but he's fine in that 7th defenseman role. He doesn't need to be an everyday player. He's fine in that 7th defenseman role. So the John Moore deal can be good as long as they keep Torrey Krug. The Joakim Nordstrom deal, not good. I don't understand what they're doing with this. Nordstrom is terrible. He had 7 points all of last year. He doesn't even belong in the NHL. I don't know why they even made that move. Obviously, they lost Tim Schaller and Riley Smith. Or Riley Nash, not Riley Smith, excuse me. So obviously, Nordstrom was brought in to replace some bottom 6 forwards, but I don't think Nordstrom adds anything to this team. I don't think he's very good at all. He's probably a guy that at some point is going to get waived and sent to Providence. I think the Bruins are going to find out very early on in training camp that he's just not very good. Chris Wagner, the deal for Chris Wagner, I love. That's the best move they did. All free agency is bringing in Chris Wagner. He's very physical, can skate really well. Great bottom 6 forward. I love that Boston brought him in. He's a great Tim Schaller replacement, and he's going to fit right in with Corrali and Achari and hitting everything that moves and playing really hard on the forecheck and physical hockey. Wagner's a great move. Their worst move is Yaroslav Halak. I don't understand what Don Sweeney was doing here. Anton Hudobin was a great backup for Boston last year. He goes to Dallas and signs a 2-year deal at $2.5 million per year. Boston lets him go and then brings in Halak for a 2-year deal at $2.75 million per year. I don't get it. Why would you pay more for Halak than what you were going to give Hudobin, who was great last year? They should have just kept Hudobin at $2.5 million and saved the money and not gone and got Halak, because Yaroslav Halak is not going to be noticeably better than what Hudobin did last year. Anton Hudobin was great for the Bruins last year as a backup goaltender. Halak is not going to be any better than that. So why pay more for him when you could have just kept Hudobin at $2.5 million? That move makes no sense to me. I don't understand why they didn't just re-sign Hudobin, but They did, and that's really the move that gets them on the loser list. That they botched the backup goaltender situation. Nordstrom's another bad move, and Moore is only a good move if they keep Torrey Krug, or at least get a Krug replacement in the trade if they trade him. But Moore, you can't trade Krug and then replace him with Moore. That's a downgrade. So Boston makes the loser list for me because they've made some very head-scratching, interesting moves. Again, I love the Wagner move. I think Moore is good if it adds to the team right. If the team stays the way it is right now, he definitely adds to that team. The Halak move and the Nordstrom move are terrible, and that gets Boston on the losers list. So those are my winners and losers from free agency, 5 of each. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Did I miss a team? Of course I did, but there's only 5 slots on each side. So, yes, I probably missed a team. But that's what I think. Let me know what you guys think. Like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media. Check out offthewallhockey.com. All those links are in the description below. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. The subscriber count is going up pretty much every day, and I want to keep that going. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll talk to you guys soon.